People who quit a job in the heat of the moment. What show did you leave them to handle? Didn't get a bonus because they felt the overtime I did paid me more than the bonus they gave to everyone else. I didn't know what to say to that, so after a few hours I offered to get coffee for everyone. Then I left and never came back or contacted them again. I keep thinking that I should go back with coffee now I've been gone 10 years and just act normal. That would be the realest thing I've ever heard of a person to do. I'll bet it's 100% different staff now. Everyone would be like, "Who are you? Thanks for the coffee." When I was a programmer at an insurance company. One of the longtime programmers had been with the company for nearly 20 years. This guy originally wrote most of the financial system himself, from scratch, and had maintained it with the help of a couple of other people. Every month he did the month-end processing and every quarter he did the quarter-end processing. Every year-end. Yep. It was him. There was a change in management a couple of times. And he kept getting treated worse and worse. He was being treated unfairly. Asked to do unreasonably more work than he was already doing. Getting thrown under the bus. That kind of thing. He finally had enough and one morning he came in. Walked to the manager's office and quit. Then walked out the door. In the aftermath it took a team of 4 other people. Months and months to get things back together and to a point where things were serviceable. You don't speak with your IT people. Learned that speak the hard way in the army. Messing with IT is a good way to make sure you have 0 of the tools necessary to do your job or at least do it efficiently. Especially now that everything is computerized. I got stabbed in the shoulder while working as a bookmaker betting shop manager. I was the only key holder, and while the paramedics were tending to me, the area manager was on the phone asking me to open the store the next day. I closed shop for the day. Came back once I got out of hospital. Put my keys in the safe and left my notice on the desk. Store didn't open for 3 days while they sorted a field manager. I worked in a store where my assistant manager was held up at gunpoint early early enough that the insert wasn't open, so they got like 150 in change. Idiots. I turn up for my shift at 12:30 and my area manager is trying to chase the forensics guys out so I can reopen the shop. I was fired years later for calling a shop I was working in a speep hole on Facebook. Appealed the firing. It was a first offense and had it reduced to a final written, then quit on the day I was supposed to start working again. Betting industry is the absolute pits. Are you that blonde lady from Snatch? Appreciated. But all bets are off. I ain't beeping buying that. Well, that's handy because I ain't beeping selling it. Worked for a landscape company doing new installs. Our owner was cheap with a bad habit of constantly biting off more than he could chew. One year he asked if we wanted any part of a school project in a city we didn't live in over 2 hours away, and we said no. He said that was fine and would just bid on one school for his crew who lived in that area. Instead he bid on multiple schools and got 3 of them. Obviously, none of us are happy about this, and he claimed that he'd put us up in hotels so we wouldn't have to commute. He never did. The work itself sucked. Way more than a crew our size could handle, and the owner's brother did absolutely nothing. He was supposed to be the project manager / supervisor, and literally all he did was play Clash of Clans on his phone and yell about people not being fast enough. After a few days, I was done. I'd grown sick of the job anyway, but this project really sealed it. Having to commute 4 hours a day and then physically destroy myself was taking a toll fast. I woke up Friday morning. Called the owner. Told him I quit and to stop taking more work than he can manage. He blew up, but I just hung up the phone and went back to sleep. 2 weeks later I get a call from him. He's begging me to come back because after I quit, Two other guys did too. The project is now woefully behind schedule and he's going to get fined if things don't pick up and get finished. I told him he should have thought of that before he bit off more than he could chew and expected a small crew to do it all in a short time frame. He got quiet and then asked if a 50-cent raise would get me back. Ha ha ha, no. Last time I ever heard from him, and I can't find his company website anymore. 50-cent raise. At first I thought I read 50%, but nope. A raise, the equivalent of a restaurant coffee a day. I thought it was 50% and still wouldn't have taken it. A 50% raise promised over the phone by a known liar is no raise at all. 18 years old. Assistant manager at a big pizza franchise. Had been working open to close for 2 weeks straight because the new GM went on vacation right after taking over the store. When she got back from her vacation, she worked a half day. I opened and still closed. Then she changed the schedule and took 2 days off. This was the last straw on top of a ton of other speep piled over a year. Multiple new GMs. Speepty district manager. Awful store politics. I was alone during an unusually large lunch rush and was just done with everyone's speep. I had a make line full of orders. Phones ringing. Oven full of pizza. Orders to be picked up. And a massive batch of dough sitting on the prep table. I said, "Beep it." I shut the oven off, walked out, and locked the store. Didn't call anyone to let them know. It would be hours before the evening driver would roll in. No prep for the day. No dough for the day except for dough blob I'm sure would become a massive mess after rising for hours. A double-deck oven with both belts full of pies wasted and what was probably shaping to be a 1,200 lunch out the window. I hope she was well rested after her time off. Did you ever hear about the fallout after you quit? Nah. Turnover was so high I hadn't gotten friendly with any of the crew to check in. When I went in to get my last check the next week, the district manager was holding a meeting with all the other local GMs in our sit-down area. I strolled through and a few of them were looking between me and the DM. DM wouldn't look at me. My store's manager handed my check over without a word. Turned her nose up and went back to the meeting as I walked out. That was like 20 years ago. Never set foot in that place again. This sounds like Pizza Hut. The one in my town is just okay in terms of quality. But if you order a pizza, it's always an hour or more for delivery, when every other place in town I have at least 4 to 5 to choose from delivers within a 30 to 45 minute window. Sounds exactly like Pizza Hut. I worked for one for 5 years. Absolutely insane working conditions. And the staff turnover was the worst I've ever seen. The one I worked at asked me 4 times to move up to shift manager and I refused every time. Shoppers beeping drug mart. I had simply asked for better hours after working ridiculous late night hours for over a year. Instead they hired a new guy and gave him the exact hours I asked for and then had me train him. So when training wasn't going very well because new guy was super slow, they blamed me for it. Now I had a good standing with everyone at the store, but I didn't need shoppers and I let a lot of speep slide every day. So again, when I asked for a vacation that I deserved because I was never sick and punctual as all hell, I was denied it, and the next day the manager had 4 weeks of vacation set. So to make it up to me, they offered me all these insane overtime shifts for the next 3 weeks. So I waited for the frozen deliveries to arrive that same day. The boss was packing up to go home, and when he said goodnight to me I said, "But who is going to do this frozen delivery?" He laughed and said, "You are." So I replied, "Nope." And he became super cross, so I started laughing. "What are you laughing about?" he says. So I said, "Beep yourself." I quit. Now there was no one to finish the night shift. He immediately asks for the uniform. LOL not. I said, "Beep yourself." I quit. I had never done that before or since. Uniform went in the trash. That's the speep I'm looking for. Of like that instant karma type speep. Always worked the close shift at a fast food joint. My managers loved to hand out citations for any little thing. The policy was 3 strikes and you're out. I had 2 strikes left and was told to clean up the entire front end and bathroom in an hour or risk getting a 3rd strike. To put things in perspective, I had to close the register, count the money, clean up the front end, restock everything, sweep and mop the floors, and clean the entire bathroom including the toilets for basically $0.05. I walked into the bathroom, just to see what to expect. Looked like someone had finished projectile speeping all over the toilet and then decided to piss next to the sink. I knew I wouldn't be able to do everything in an hour and that I would get fired regardless. So, I took my uniform off and walked home shirtless. Should have thrown it onto the floor. In the bathroom. Worked as the engineer at the mill. Was responsible for operation and process adjustment of certain piece of equipment. Made it works with better than specified results. But my managers required more production, less power, etc. So, at the point machine reached its capacity, and further pushing was risky and huge amount of invest was needed. I was told by brass that you didn't even try to do it. Only say some lame excuses. I was full of this speep and called to the manufacturer of this equipment. Long story short, instead of instructions and advices, they sent me a job offer for local service rep. After I quit the mill, my ex-colleagues tried to push machine above the limits and successfully broke it and stopped the production for couple of weeks. Please tell me you took the local service rep job and then came back to the mill after they broke it and sold them a new one / an expensive fix. Exactly. Their faces was precious. When new service engineer comes to repair. Now I'm doing basically the same job as before but instead 1 machine and 1 mill. I have to work at the dozen mills across the country. 4 mill. 1 3-day service visit roughly costs my monthly salary from before. Anyway, I don't like to be an asshole more than I have to. So I'm still keep in touch with my colleagues. Because they are still nice guys except my ex-manager. Who are still asshole. And he is banned from this machine. Well, this looks all kinds of screwed up. Why did you push it above our recommended specs? That just voids all kinds of warranties and is the stupidest thing I have seen on 10 years of the job of operating and repairing these machines. I worked as a small engine repair tech for a larger company. I am also in the National Guard. I had gotten hurt and needed physical therapy and 1 or 2 days a month I would have to miss because of an extended drill weekend. Well, my boss didn't like that and she decided that she would punish me by making me stay later than everyone else. She was punishing me for going to physical therapy for a workplace injury and for being a soldier. Now, you may be thinking, having to stay late to keep up on your work doesn't sound like that much of a punishment. Normally, you would be right, but trust me, she was doing a lot more to make sure it was a punishment. Well, one day after being told that I was not given approval for the 1 day of vacation I asked for 3 months in advance to go see the eclipse and generally being treated like a slave. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And clocked out at the end of my shift. That next Monday after drill weekend, I showed up, packed up all my tools and took off. My boss started freaking out when she saw what I was doing. I left and found out that me leaving cost her over $100,000 because she had to ship my workload to another state to get another shop to work on them. That meant she needed to pay to ship them. And then pay to ship them back, and since her shop didn't do any of the actual work, she never saw any money for any of the repairs. It was over 80 riding hours. Holy hell. I hope she learned her lesson. I get frustrated with people like this. People who don't treat other people like people. Super happy to hear that she was out 100k. It's a special kind of personality. 2. Like. Not only do they just speep on people for the lulz, but they speep on people they will be fbeeped to see leave them and are shocked when it bites them in the ass. Surprised Pikachu face. I had a job as a fairly niche field service engineer in IT. Started off covering my local area, which was fine. Maybe an hour traveling time to my most remote site. Tops. Then they lost an engineer in my adjacent territory and I had to cover that too. Put my travel time up to about 2.5 hours each way. That wasn't great. But it was temporary. Allegedly. Then they lost a further engineer and guess what? I had to cover that area too. That meant I was having to do up to 4 hours driving each way just to get to a site. And then they expected me to put in up to a full 8-hour day. I mentioned this to my manager and pointed out that if I was pulling multi-day jobs at a site 4 hours away, it'd be far better to put me up in a hotel. But they said not, as it was unusual for me to do multi-day installs. Anyway, a month or so later, I was expected to put in a complete new system at a site. Spec'd up 4 full days to do it. High-profile client, and I basically told my manager I needed a hotel. They pushed back. It's only 4 days, you'll be fine. Just charge them the travel time as worked hours. Which is fine. But I was salaried and they were the ones invoicing the client, so no overtime for me. Anyway. On the second day I arrived at nearly lunchtime after a massive accident on the motorway held me up for 4 hours and got a complete bollocking off the client for it. I thought, beep this. Packed my tools. Left the site with their old system ripped out and a pile of unopened boxes of new kit. Switched off my mobile and drove to head office. Parked close enough to the main entrance that the car operated the automatic doors. Went into reception. And told the receptionist very politely. It wasn't her fault that I quit. All my gear was in the car and here are my keys, phone and pass. Then walked out and got a cab home. Found out from a friend that they lost that client, which was one of their main ones. Even after my manager basically spent the rest of the week installing the kit on his own. Without any documentation, as I'd written the spec and accidentally kept it. That could be the company I work for. I've been in a similar situation, except I was on the account management side. Had half of account management cut, my account load doubled after they cut the other manager who did similar type work. It got crazy real quick. My boss understood it was not a good situation, but his hands were tied due to the cuts coming from the VP. I quit shortly after all this, did my best to transition the work to another person as I didn't want to burn a bridge. It was funny because that person was very gung-ho about taking everything over. Within a year of me quitting, the VP was fired. The person who took over my job quit and we lost about 80% of the customers we had. It was truly spectacular. My old boss reached out to me with an offer I couldn't refuse and I ended up coming back. It appears that the lesson was very well learned, as things are much more sane and we have a much more competent leadership team and the business is once again growing. I was a hostess for Denny's in Arkansas. The waiter/waitresses continuously degraded me, and on top of that, my manager is a functioning alcoholic. The cash registers broke trillions of times and I kept getting yelled at for speep I literally had no control over. One day the registers went down the same day the AC went down. I had plenty of people coming up yelling at me because I wasn't getting tickets out, nor was I getting anyone cashed out. People were piling up. I was getting yelled at because I wasn't sitting people fast enough because I was dealing with those who had exact change so I could get them out and put it in the register when it came back online. Suddenly, I heard one of the waitresses comment on how red my face is. I'm dehydrated, I replied, as I'm not allowed to have drinks up front. I had a water bottle hidden. But I could only take a few stealthy sips an hour. A waitress found it during the ocean of people raising hell with me. And took it from me. I lost my speep and quit later that day. I left midway through the ocean of people to attend to my mom during her doctor's appointment. Denny's is funny online, but every Denny's I've encountered is a real speep show.